Hello, everybody. How you doing? Everybody's talking about demoralization, communism, and a lot of things that are really important to talk about. And you know what? An interesting phenomenon we have when somebody who claims to be far right, like Nick Fuentes, goes and parties with Mamdani when Mamdani wins in New York, who claims to be a far left. And they're both lying, and they're all part of the same psyops, and everybody's talking about. But there's always going to be psyops coming your way. Always, 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 always. Why? Because as long as psychopaths are born and it's genetic and it happens sometime out of nowhere, they would always figure out the very simple scheme called the pyramid scheme. They would convince someone they can do something, and they start growing and growing and growing. And there are a lot, oh no, what happened to the camera? And there are a lot of different ways to build the same pyramid scheme. And of course, the biggest company in every country is usually the state. So can you imagine, without building anything, you can be elected to running and being the CEO of the biggest company in your country, and that comes with all the resources of that country and all the power that you could imagine. So yes, there would be always somebody who would try to get in power, not to make the world better, but to tap into the resources that the state offers. So there are only basic two ways of fighting that. Actually, even one, but here's the thing: education. What is democracy? Democracy means that every person is a shareholder in the company that is called the state. And as a shareholder, what you're supposed to do is always make sure that the company you have your biggest stakes at is functioning properly and doing what it needs to be done. But what happens if all the stakeholders don't do their job? Every person in democracy needs to do their job, to know who they're electing. And not only that, they always need to check everything. Is everything done properly, not properly? Be whistleblowers and talk about things and discuss it. And first of all, like just talking. Hey, I found this corruption. Just tell your family, just let people know. Just to make sure that in the most insignificant elections, the best person would get elected. Because even the most tiniest elected position is running a huge company that you have, if you can vote, you have a share at. And not only that you have a share at, right? It's like you buy the taxes that you pay, you can look at it as basically you buying stock. And yes, the rich pay more and buy more stock. They have more influence, true. But it makes sense that they would have it. So here's the thing that had happened. First of all, the education system. So in the universities, there are people who are called academics. What is special about academics, and actually people who are in education in every shape, way, or form, I'm talking about even mothers. It's important, okay? There are jobs, especially in the education world. The job that I do is compared to the amount of work you have to put in to be a professor or to do what I do, the amount of knowledge that you need to have, the amount of expertise, the amount of uniqueness that you have to offer as an educator, especially in universities, but always in what I do as well. And I can tell you that all that work goes to a very small amount of people who can appreciate it, a very small amount. But though this work, the education, the things that professors do, the education does, and people like I do, it's fundamental to society. But it works in a very interesting way where the education works with, you have the very, very expert people on top, and then they give information not to the whole population, because it's impossible. The population as a whole, it needs everything to be dumbed down and broken down into something that is simple, but you cannot really do anything without seeing the full picture. So only a select few would want to even know the full picture so that they could do the right thing in an educated way, which makes sense. But here's what happens. Educators, like for example, what I'm doing right now, I can tell you this is the most common form of hidden slavery, because there are videos out on YouTube which are on the highest level of education that you can get, but very few would watch them because it's complex. So these people who create those videos have to put in the most amount of years and then get the least views. And then those who watch them, ironically, right, they can dumb it down and take all the work that they did and then communicate it downstream. But here's the thing. There are two things that are happening here. One way of making sure that education dies is by making people like me realize that it's not worth it to try to bring anything to the public in high level, because if I make something stupid, I could do it, I could do, instead of like giving information that is high level and letting mediators translate it into something simple, I can do the simple stuff and get the cash. But then who would do the high level deep dive that requires years of education? Who would do that? Nobody. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to have what you need. So what happens to people like that? They get angry, resentful, and bitter, but they are smart. So what they do is evil. And this is what happened in the universities in the United States. They started cooperating with foreign forces who wanted to take over the United States and other places as well. So what did they do? Here's the thing, okay? In every university, it was a protocol. So when I say protocol, it's something that you must do no matter what, even if you can't follow through. A professor in university had to, in the 50s, had to follow a certain protocol. The protocol said, when in the beginning of every lecture you say, check my data, question me, don't trust me, double check everything I say. You have to go home and understand that you need to do what, double check me, all right? What did they do? They took that away. They stopped following this protocol, and now in universities in the United States, in elite universities, what the exam is whatever the educator says, whatever. True, false, doesn't matter. And it's a pyramid scheme. So education was the first thing that turned into pyramid scheme, because it's the first place where you accumulate the most amount of bitter people. Ugh, I don't know what that is. I have this weird bug. I'm so sorry. Okay. So professors in Harvard, Columbia, in the 50s, 60s, were like tempted. They're like, because they put in all the work, but they have no power, no real power. So they get degraded and they get bitter and vengeful. And they start cooperating with the USSR and then China, Qatar, and so on. And they knew what to do. They are professors. They know how to turn people into zombies if they want to. This is awful. I don't know what's going on with my camera. I apologize. Okay. Yes, such a weird thing. Can you see? It's like, what happened? I'm sorry. I'm just gonna change the camera to my computer's camera because this is unbearable. Okay, I apologize, you guys. Yeah, all right. So in the US, they would never say that. Exams are multiple choice. Give kids cheat sheets to study. The rest, they entertain the kids for an hour during class. Oh, you think they didn't know what they were doing when they did that? Oh, they knew. Because here's the thing with protocols. They need it. It was done with intention. So the professors knew exactly what they were doing when they stopped saying, double check me. And here's the other thing they did. All the courses in humanities, all the courses had to have logics. Mathematical logic was a mandatory course in humanities. They took it away. Do you think the professors didn't understand what they were doing when they took away logical thinking from humanities and made it not mandatory? Do you think they didn't know what they were doing when they stopped following the protocol? Even if you just say it, it matters because it makes it clear. Even the students are usually lazy, they don't double check anyway. But it makes it clear that this is something you're supposed to be doing, whether or not they do it away or not. And why did they do it? Because they knew that by removing those things, you take away a person's individuality, identity, and thinking abilities. And you're turning them to parrots. This is where pyramid schemes start, education. And then what was the communism? What was the first pyramid scheme? Especially since people go, and just like the professors, notice what I told you here, right? People put a lot of years in education and then basically don't get the reward that is matching their efforts. But when the professors, who are the smartest and they knew exactly what they were doing, took away the ability of people to doubt, think, and everything like that, they knew that they are creating a generation that is in even if down the line those students would understand what had happened to them. Can you imagine paying for Harvard? And even, you know what, even if education is free, can you imagine going to school for 4 years, sitting from dusk to dawn, only to later realize that it was a scheme? But then that means that you basically can erase that line from your resume, and that you are not supposed to be getting paid more than a person who didn't go through the scheme because you went through a scheme. So what do? They keep quiet. They keep quiet because they want to get paid for the years that they went through this education. And then what happens is that you have people who's just copy it. And here are two elements that are important. So you have those who do it with intention. And then remember what I said. Education is high work, low reward. Motherhood as well. It's because it's built into Western society, that message, right? So motherhood is not rewarded. It's something that looks like an obligation that the woman must do. Treadwife. Do you know what is the cost of treadwife? The cost of treadwife is our women who work their asses off, but their job is taken for granted. They don't have their own say. They don't have any real ability to decide anything on their life. They are bound to the household because they have the children. And then their work is not appreciated outside the house, so they cannot even go outside and get like and be independent. So invisible jobs are very problematic for society. And it starts with prestige. And then here's another thing, because you know how there is this saying, there are things that are so ludicrous that it only takes a genius to make it make sense. Well, those geniuses, they know what they're doing. I'll tell you right now, they're geniuses, they know what they're doing. Unless it's a mathematician that is autistic, they know what they're doing. So they know exactly how to use language to confuse the common person, the layperson, and sell ludicrous ideas to them. And first and foremost, and they do it out of spite. And here's the second element. Why is no one stopping them? Well, because those who can stop them don't have real power, because professors don't have real power, mothers don't have real power, educators in general don't have real power, and they're exhausted. That's the second reason. They're exhausted. So if you work like a slave for free, what happens is that you are either spiteful or exhausted. You're either resentful or you're too tired to deal with it. So you have those who do it out of spite and those who don't stop them out of exhaustion. And believe me, the more I am on YouTube, the more I know that. Why? Because I can see so many people, rabbis and experts, who give information on the highest level possible, and then they get no reward for it. And knowing how much work it is to make these education materials, first of all, nobody here thinks it's work. I don't know why, but just people don't think it's work. That's one thing that I've noticed. People are like, so people don't see that kind of line as work at all. Like they don't appreciate it. And then I can see I struggle with that as well. So motherhood is also that, which is so important. So you have the combination of spite and exhaustion. And from the educators, remember, educators shape your brain. If your educator, mother or teacher, which by the way, the fact that most educators for a long time were female, it seeps into the general population. And then it's so easy. So why does it start with education? Why is it always? Nazism started with universities. Communism starts with educated people. Everything, all those things, all those bad ideas, they don't start by, it's not the Palpians that start them. They pretend it's the people in the street that started, but they don't. It's always the most educated people that do. So, and then it's a very easy idea to sell. Once you get the education people who are like that, then it sips in, right? So you have a pyramid scheme. And then what happens is, because you have severed the education, you lose critical thinking and you lose identity, which are connected. So people lose their identity. And if you look at traditional, for example, Judaism stuff, right? Identity is linked to the mother. The mother is the one that is supposed to ground you into your identity. So, and questioning is the way that you build your identity. So when those things don't happen, you lose your ability to think and your ability to yourself, basically. There is no self. and all you feel like you can do, and you get demoralized because when you don't have a self and you don't have critical thinking, you feel like you are a clog in the system. You are a leaf in the wind. And then somebody comes to you and says, hey, like, here's what is happening. There is this big company, and how about you become a worker, right? A member of the company. You'll get employed by the company. You don't have to worry. You don't have to think. You don't have to do anything. You'll be employed by the company. All you have to do is to vote for me. And the company is, of course, the government. And so the government grows and grows and grows and grows and employs more and more and more, because these people want to be fed and they want to be taken care of, and they don't want to think. And a lot of times they can't. So what we are having right now, why is it so dangerous? Because between Cuomo and Mandani, there is a real problem. The vast majority of the population can't think. They don't have critical thinking, and they don't have an identity. They don't have either. And those who are able to think, those who have critical thinking, have strong identity, they're exhausted and demoralized. So they don't do their job. They just give up. They just give up. And there is another element to that, right? Because they give up, because they're demoralized, they stop doing their own job at whatever place they can do something. So if the mother is the educator, if we're being very trad wife, like traditional family here, if the mother is the education, right, that's the resentful part, the resentful or whatever, and the father is is supposed to balance that. So what happens when the fathers don't check in to see how the mother is doing. They're like, as far as they're concerned, the job is being done, the kids look alive, and they don't care that the mother is exhausted. And one day it blows up. It blows up. So what does the father do? He gets a nanny. He gets a nanny, and then let's say, or whatever, and he says, oh, look at that, here's a nanny. He can do whatever the mother does without any rights. So she doesn't live in the house, so it's way cheaper. You don't have to think about the emotional part. You don't have to. She comes, like, takes care of the children and goes, and she does everything, gets paid, and goes and leaves. Right? So it's like amazing. Like, the nanny does a way better job than the mother. And and then it's like, okay, it's expensive. So what do? Immigration. You find the nannies that would work for no money at all. So here is what it looks like when it comes to a city like New York, right? You have the invisible layer. You have from those who clean the streets. You have those who are educators, the teachers, the police people, the people that without them, you don't have a city. But what happens is that the work that they have to put is kind of invisible, so nobody checks on them. And with time their conditions even get worse. But because everybody wants to come and live in a city, here you have like a race to the bottom. So at first you have people who are like they are students, and they are basically, they want to make like an easy money. So they start teaching. They're teachers, but it's like a side job for them. It's not something they are experts of. And now everybody's like, okay, you have somebody who would occupy your children, right, from morning till evening, and nobody checks on it. Nobody checks on them. So nobody cares what's all going on there. And then what happens is that these people, sometimes they build something that calls union, and unions are problematic because at some point it's like what happens with unions is that it becomes a collective, and there is no incentive for the individual to be better because everybody is getting the same conditions no matter how good they are or not, which is what happens in education, by the way, as well. There is no competitiveness there. So what happens is that you have this those who swipe the streets, the taxi driver, a lot of different people, and they're doing the job and they're getting paid for it. And of course, if they live in New York, then they're getting paid nicely for it. But nobody checks on it, and the city grows and grows and grows. And with this growth, then you get more and more traffic. The more traffic, the more time it takes for people to get to their jobs. The more expensive the rent is, right? The more expensive the rent is, the more time it gets. So they work more, and basically, when it comes to reality, they earn less, right? So it looks like the same amount of money, but everything is more expensive because everybody's flocking into the city because it's so what happens is that obviously they could all be like, I'm not swiping the streets in this place. So it's like, I cannot live here and live. And then people are like, no, you have to pay them more to make them stay, right? So it balances out. But here's the thing. Because everybody wants to live in New York, you're going to find people who will do the same without asking for more. So after these people are kind of exhausted, you get illegal immigrants and immigrants in general, who for them, sleeping in a tent and swiping cities in New York is an upgrade because nobody is shooting at them actively. So it's like, it doesn't, like, it's like, for them, it's like it's an upgrade. But they give birth to children who never experienced the trenches and that it could be worse. And what they see is what they presume, a lot of them, as unfair treatment, right? People who work their butts off for works that are necessary. Their parents are immigrants, and they're invisible. Not only are they invisible when it comes to pay, these are people you don't even say hello to. These are people who people pretend don't exist. And even if those parents came from countries where they knew communism is crap, where they hated Islam with passion, as far as their children are concerned, at least back then, they had respect. And they cannot think because the education system is broken. They don't have an identity. And at worst, they become more and more suicidal. So this is one side of the equation. The other side is also that the more populated the city is, the more like, so you have like, the maturing of society. So even if you're an entrepreneurial in your heart, right? It's like there isn't a niche when you have a new place, right? When it's a new place, people are like, okay, somebody needs to open a supermarket. Somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to do this company, that company. Suddenly you get to a place where the market is saturated, and not every person is like a disruptive genius that can be like, okay, what doesn't exist yet? Like the thought of what doesn't exist yet is getting harder and harder. Rent goes up and up. Things get more expensive. There are more people who at the bottom, right, who come from places where they're like, okay, at least nobody's killing me, so I'll be a slave. But the next generation doesn't want that anymore, and then they get no education, and then they are like, okay, you know what? Let's burn everything down. That's where it leads to. Okay. And definitely it doesn't help when finally, when you vote in like a Republican Party who want to fix everything, it's corrupted to the core. Now, I lost hope when Trump announced a big, fat, beautiful bill. Unless every sentence in that bill is listing a governmental office that needs to be closed down, which in that case I would accept that would really be a beautiful big bill. Just the fact that it's big, I was like, that's it. That's it. That's it. Suffocating. So you have like here's the thing, right? So you have this bubble where the government pays to cover up for the existing problems. So nobody gets incentive to fix it. So people, the immigration, like the immigrant, yes, they would swipe up the street basically for free, in theory. But here's the thing, the new wave of immigration, they grew up in an era with an internet. And now this is where the internet comes into play. They knew what to expect when they came. They knew how the locals live. So they never come, almost, especially, with the mindset that immigrants that came before of like, okay, I'm going to work hard and build myself. No. They come to take, because here's the internet. You see everybody talking about the internet like brings bad ideas. No, the internet is literally a huge projection of look how rich I am and how everything is good here. So do you think that the people who are watching are like, oh, I'm gonna go grab some of that, are not gonna go there? It is Hollywood. And like the thing of and then here's the change of a mindset that happened. So in the 50s, 40s, the mindset was, we'll come to you and we will teach you how to be like us. So South Korea, Japan, right, became rich, became like those countries that are, and countries in Europe, right? The Americans would come and be like, hey, if you do this, this, and that, you're gonna get a successful society. But at some point, it was like, especially in the 60s, right? Yes, first you fight a war, you take over, and then you take over and you teach them how to be better. But what happens if you don't finish the war and you don't teach people how to be better? Like in Gaza right now, right? Because you need to take over the education system, like what happened in South Korea, what happened in Japan, what happened in Germany. It's the only way you can make those countries better. So, by the way, like this is why places that were taken over by the Brits, Singapore, Hong Kong, are successful to this day, because the Brits also intervened with the education system. They intervened with the value system of every place so that the values that they had brought in general, made a lot of things better. The Dutch, for example, didn't do it. So it was something that is unique to the British. So they went. They brought up they brought up values with them, like ending the transatlantic slavery and so on and so forth. And then the ones who inherited that mindset from the Brits were, by the way, there is one thing that both the Brits and the Americans, no matter what, they always had like a soft spot for Muslims. So wherever Muslims were involved, like the Brits, they didn't do anything good, believe me. Like it's like it was bleh. But like in general, right? Let's say like a lot of places they took, they had a positive impact. So now what are they doing? They go to Vietnam. Did they bother, unlike Japan or South Korea, did they bother to install a better education system and value system there? No, they didn't. Did they bother doing it anywhere? No, they didn't. So you get people who are resentful, and it looks like, and it's like those people don't, these places don't improve. What did you fight for? They didn't improve because it takes years. It took decades. The Americans were in all those places that that are successful now. Decades. The Brits, Singapore, decades. So and Islam is a destructive ideology that is stronger than anything. So that's a different problem, but I don't want to focus on Islam. So just everything I'm saying, it's more complicated with places that have Islam in them in general. Okay, Islam is problematic. But everywhere that is pagan, it can work. Paganism is better than Islam. Paganism has hope. Honestly, places that are pagan, they have hope in becoming better. Places that are Islamic, they don't. So, but it's a different conversation that I don't want to go into. So yeah, so so you get that so people come, immigrants come, and nobody has any need to improve the situation. Santos, India has hope. Yeah, India has hope. Yes. So and those invisible jobs, like invisible people, that's scary. But there is a way to fight that. So I do want to bring Judaism, because Judaism managed to traditionally have a very good way to fight out. Oh, first of all, motherhood is a profession all in by itself, right? So it's like it's a very prestige. It looks as heroism. It's all by itself. It looks at it. It has the prestigious title of a job. There is the husbands are involved, because they, by the way, the husband, Talmud forces the husband to be with their children, and they are the husbands are actually the ones that are responsible to their education, to teach them a trade, and to teach them to swim as well, which is a fun anecdote. And the mothers are responsible on the part of the identity. So the mothers would remind the fathers and the children, right? They core them down into the traditional identity, and so you have that split. But honestly, like and here's another thing that they did. By the way, it's not perfect, because actually having it that gendered is also problematic. I'll explain in a second. But the other thing that they did is that education, being a rabbi. What is being a rabbi? Being a rabbi is, first of all, being a teacher. The teacher, the rabbi, is the most prestigious kind of work that you could do in a community. But of course, teachers, they need to teach everyone, and not everybody has money. So what they do? They would couple the business, which usually the woman is the businesswoman, the money is the woman usually, and the educator, which would be the man. Not perfect. Those things need to be switched from time to time. Sometimes it needs to be that the woman is the educator and the man is the business. it's important that those things wouldn't be gendered, because if you gender them, it makes a very weird situation where the women are both educated and touch grass, and the men don't touch grass, and they're like completely, they don't understand reality at all. It's not that they're bad fathers or anything. It's just that when it comes to how reality works, like they don't have any touch, which is what happens in the Hasidic community right now, which women are very mad about. It's like, we don't have anything to talk about with these men because they think they're educated, but you cannot understand anything if you don't understand reality. Like if you just live in a room, it's like you'll never learn anything either. So so people love the idea of having things gendered, but having things gendered is problematic, because whatever little bit of a rift you create, it will exaggerate with time. So you need to let it like happen, but like just have like an outline, but make sure it's not like that. Okay, just saying. So what happens is that they would link the educator with the person with the money. So the people with the money were obligated to literally, like, basically finance the educator. So that's the thing we're at. The other thing that you need to understand is how to make sure that there is no slavery in your system at all. Because if you take advantage of people wanting to live in a city, and when doing so, you basically are like, you let the person who swipes the floor swipe it, and you just make sure, like, you just look for the one that would get the least pay for it and then care about it. You're gonna have two results. First of all, like, one result is nobody would do it, which would make your city disgusting. By the way, that's the end result anyway. Or on the contrary, that they would union, right? And then they would start bullying you because they're like, oh, you want people to swipe? Well, you better pay. And then they don't, and again, they would have no incentive to individually swipe properly. So you get that this is how you start getting communism. So that's the two things. But it's so important that you would have, everything needs to be checks and balances. And it's so important that every citizen would be involved. And it's just critical. That's all I have to say. So I actually want to show you this video by Ben Shapiro. And I'm gonna try to fix my camera as I do. So unfortunately, like, compared to, I see a lot of his other videos here, this one is actually getting less views, which is unfortunate. This is why the economy is failing. I think that's a very important video to watch.
If you actually want to bring down prices.
Here, which is 100% true. What he's saying, the problem is that that this system that is suggesting doesn't cover up for the education and the slavery mechanisms that form when you have real competition. So you need to understand that, and that comes with education. So what I just explained, all the intro that I did, was the two things that are critical. And once you have those covered, right, then you can apply what Ben is saying here.
You actually want affordability. We know the things that make affordability happen here on planet Earth. They are free markets, deregulation, they are free trade, comparative advantage. That's what brings prices down. Now, that's not going to affect everybody equally beneficially. Some people are going to do a lot better than others. Some people, presumably, will be the victims of what Joseph Schumpeter, the economist, called creative destruction. Every time you have a new industry or a more competitive business that comes up, somebody loses in that particular zero-sum game. But the thing about the market is that it has many iterations. And so even if you lose in that particular game, you then get to come back and do it again and become even more competitive. And that is why free markets always drive prices down. It's why when there are people out there who are critical of quote unquote luxury products, we have to understand that everything that you now consider to be a necessity, a staple of your life, was once a luxury product. The food that you eat at your table is significantly more diverse than the food that your great grandparents ate. Why? Because at one point it was a luxury for rich people, and then it turned out a lot of people wanted it, and there was competition to bring it to the people, and the prices went down. That was true of cars, it's true of microwaves, it's true of centralized air conditioning, it is true of your cell phone. Literally every product that you use was once a luxury product. It's why when you go back and watch the old movie Wall Street, and you see Gordon Gekko walking around with a cell phone, and everyone's like, ooh, and it looks like a shoebox that he's holding to his head. And now every single person, including the poorest American, has a cell phone. Okay, that's what free markets do. But it seems that no one is even willing to argue for free markets these days anymore. And then why are we surprised when we disappoint? Because if you keep using a screwdriver to try and knock in the nail, you're unlikely to be successful. So there's a lot of angst on the Republican side of the aisle about the state of the economy and also about the Trump affordability issues. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, who of course understands capitalism better than I do. Scott Bessent, he says that we are going to bring prices down over the next years and months.
I can tell you what we're not going to do is what happened under the Biden administration, where the administration and the media gaslit everyone and said, there's a vibe session. You don't understand how good you have it. And what happened then was we had the worst inflation 40 or 50 years, 22, 23%, but the basket of goods and services for working Americans was up more than 30%. And what we're seeing is we had to stop the increase first. Now we are starting to see prices level off, come down. Gasoline is down, interest rates are down, so mortgages are down. And I think we are making substantial progress on that. And I think over the coming months and the next year, prices are going to come down.
The American people are deeply unhappy with our politics right now, like truly unhappy with our politics. And I think there is a reason for that. And the reason is everyone is lying to them. And they are buying the lies. And then it turns out the consequences of those lies do not result in people awakening. They just result in people turning to the next grifter who walks up the block. I point this out because there's an interesting Wall Street Journal piece today looking at the polling data. Quote, U.S. elections are sending a consistent message. Americans are deeply frustrated with their government's inability to solve problems. The latest example arrived Tuesday in a rebuke of President Trump as voters rallied to Democrats in hopes they can better address affordability and other major challenges. That pushback was delivered just 12 months after the president swept all 7 of the top battleground states in a show of Republican dominance. The rapid-fire swing in fortunes for both parties is the result of a narrowly divided nation quick to throw out elected officials seen as...
Okay. There is some rambling here. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
slow to improve their lives. To many Americans, government is literally not working, as evidenced by a federal shutdown that is now stretched into the longest in U.S. history. So if you look at the last couple of decades, control of Congress and the White House has seesawed between the parties significantly more frequently. Take a look at this. Okay, back in the mid-1960s.
Here, this is what I want to show you. I'm skipping ahead. Go watch the video of Ben Shapiro if you want to watch everything. And I want to say thank you, Bill Galatica, for your support here. And Mahmoud here for his support as well. If you guys want to support me, go to Buy Me Coffee, PayPal, whatever works for you. That would be great. Listen, like seriously, this is the only way I could do what I do with you guys supporting me. So, okay, how do I?
Early 1960s, trust in government was very, very high, like up near 80%. And then as government radically grew over the course of the Great Society programs from LBJ and in the era that followed, the Nixon and Carter era, it absolutely nosedived all the way from almost 80% all the way down to below 30%. That's as the government grew. It's as the government became, quote unquote, more helpful to your lives, as the government intervened more and more and spent more and more. That is not a coincidence. As government grows, people expect more from the government. And when the government fails to deliver, they get disappointed. So during the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan said the government is not going to fix your problems, you're going to fix your problems, and I'm going to get government out of the way, trust in government went up again. You can see it in the polling data. It went from about 30% into the mid 40s. And then near the end of the 1980s, it started to decline again. It declined all the way until the mid 1990s. And then in the mid 1990s, something happened. What happened in the mid 1990s? The Gingrich Revolution. Bill Clinton started to make deals to cut the size and scope of government, including on things like welfare reform. And then trust in government started to go up again. It started to increase all the way up to 50% by about 2000. And then what happened? The government started to radically grow again under George W. Bush. People forget George W. Bush was not a fiscal conservative. George W. Bush was a quote unquote compassionate conservative. And leaving aside the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, he spent an awful lot of money. It was he who expanded Medicare Part D. It was he who expanded the No Child Left Behind Act. It was he who did steel tariffs. And the trust in government continued to decline until finally it seemed to crater out around 2010 in the aftermath of the Great Recession at around 20%. And it has been there basically ever since. So for people who are big proponents of big government, I have a question. Explain this chart. Why is it that there seems to be an inverse relationship between the size and growth of government and trust in government? If government is so amazing at everything, if government is so great at everything, why is it that in the eras where government is cut, trust goes up, and in the era where government grows, trust goes down? Why is that happening? This is a deeply important point, really important, because you have politicians on both sides who are fully incapable of just saying the truth. They're afraid the American people will get angry at them if they say the truth. The truth is, the vast majority of problems in the lives of Americans are not solvable by the government. There are many problems created by the government, skewing of markets. If you look at a chart of the products in American life that have grown more expensive over the course of the last 30 years, and the products that have grown less expensive, significantly less expensive over the course of the last 30 years, something shocking occurs. The products that have grown more expensive.
Guys can hear. It kind of said like it lost connection to the voice for a moment. Let me just react to that. The problem is trust in government doesn't mean the government has your best interest. Who cares about how much people trust? The government has never delivered unless there's a war. Okay, let me just say that this actually proves the point. Okay, so there shouldn't be any trust in government because government doesn't have your interest and you shouldn't trust them ever, ever. This is why you want to make sure that they are as small as they could be. Basically, like you make sure that they are small because you don't trust them. And then it's like, okay, so we gotta have them. There will be some damage, but let's make the damage minimal by making sure the government is minimal and actually like having everything else go to the public so that it would be done in a way that is fair trade. It is true. There is only one thing that the government should exist for, and that is war. War is the only thing, because that's the thing that you need. War is the war, and maybe war and maybe education. You know, war and maybe education, but like yeah, that's the thing. It's like the argument needs to be about what should be governmental responsibility and what shouldn't be, because you cannot trust them ever, ever, ever. That's the whole point. Okay, let me go back.
Are all subsidized by the government. Education, college education, healthcare, health insurance, right? All these things have continued to go up because they are subsidized by the government, and the government skews the markets. And then there are, the everyday products you use, like your TV, like your phone, right? These things have all gone down. Your dishwasher, all these things are less expensive and better. Why? Because markets work to make things cheaper and more plentiful, and government makes things significantly more expensive by skewing the incentive structures. And yet no politician will say this. Every politician is doing a version of what Zoran Mamdani did in New York. It's why you see people on the right who are praising Zoran. Well, he said affordability a lot. I hear this a lot from people on the right. He did talk about affordability. And if President Trump just talks more about affordability, that means that he'll win. No, it doesn't. The party in power is going to be blamed for lack of affordability. The party out of power is going to claim that if you gave them power, they will solve the affordability problem by having more power. This is a race to the bottom in terms of centralized government control. But here's the thing. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better because if each party pledges that they will expand government in ways and times of their own choosing, and then they fail, and then the other party just does the same thing, then trust in government is going to continue to crater. It's going to continue to go down. We need someone, for the love of Mike, we need someone to just say the truth. I can't fix a lot of these problems. You can fix many of these problems. The best thing that I can do is get out of your way. Deregulation, lower taxes, less government interventionism. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe.
Muted. Sorry. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Have a good day.